Hey guys, Pi here. In this video I'm going to be telling you all about my scariest experience whilst backpacking. This is the second video in our collaboration series with other backpackers on YouTube. So throughout the video you can click the link in the right hand corner here to check out all the other videos in this series, which I encourage you to go do now. So my scariest experience whilst backpacking was on the Appalachian Trail back in 2011. Which is 4 years before I completed my through hike. I'd been working at a summer camp in upstate New York in 2010 and 11. And in 2011, the summer camp was over. I had a few days to myself, so I decided to get out on the trail and hike for 3 or 4 days and kind of de-stress and relax a little bit. So I was still fairly new to backpacking at this point. Like, I'd acquired some of my own gear. I think I had my own tent and my own sleeping bag, but the rest of the gear I just kind of gathered together from friends or from the actual summer camp itself, so it was kind of a mishmash of gear. But yeah, I was excited and I was ready to go. Right at the last minute, one of the guys lent me an old rain jacket, so I sort of threw that in my backpack. And this was in September time that it happened, so the weather was still pretty nice at that point. It was pretty warm, you know, no rain, nothing like that. It was pretty good conditions. But one of the girls from the camp, she encouraged me, or she basically forced me to take her North Face fleece. And I was like, I'm not going to need this, you know, it's not going to be cold enough at night, but you know, whatever, to keep her happy, I just took it anyway, shoved it down in my backpack and kind of off I went. My friend dropped me off to the trailhead on the New York section. I was just going to be heading north for 3 or 4 days. So when I actually got out onto the trail, it was beautiful sunny weather. I want to say it was maybe like 20 degrees Celsius outside, bright blue skies and really sunny. So those first few days were amazing. It was such a nice thing because there was not many people out on the trail, and it gave me a good chance to sort of de-stress a little bit. But then fast forward to what I think was the 3rd morning on the trip. Woke up, you know, kind of got out of the tent. There was a little bit of rain in the air, but nothing too serious. So, you know, started hiking just as I had been the past few days. And then about lunchtime, it started raining a little bit heavier, but it was still pretty warm. So I didn't bother putting on my rain jacket. I just kind of hiked through it. And by about mid-afternoon, I think I stopped for a break just to rest my legs a little bit, maybe fill up on water. I can't quite remember exactly. But because I'd been hiking, my body temperature was pretty high. Even though I was wearing wet clothes, I was still warm. But within a few minutes of actually sitting down and taking a break, I got quite cold and the wind started to pick up a little bit. So yeah, I did eventually pull out the rain jacket, put it on, and kind of made a plan for the next few hours. My plan was to hike another, I think it was about 5 miles. And I was thinking, yeah, I've got plenty of time to be doing this. This is kind of like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. So, you know, that was the plan. And then I think an hour back on the trail, I think I was going up I think I was heading sort of upwards, and so it got a little bit colder and a little bit colder, and the wind started to pick up. And by this point, everything was soaked through. You know, my shoes were soaked through, the shorts, the t-shirt, the rain jacket. It was an old rain jacket, so it wasn't super waterproof. So now I'm soaking wet, and the wind's really starting to pick up, and I'm starting to get a little bit cold. I've got no gloves, hands are starting to get cold. And then it starts snowing in September, in like the middle of September, and the previous day it had been like 20 degrees Celsius outside. So I'm thinking, like, what's going on? Like, this is September, it's not meant to be snowing right now. But yeah, anyway, I kind of pushed on a little bit, and now it was getting really cold, and the wind was just blowing straight through me. I could barely feel my hands, and I had to make a decision whether to go on or whether to just kind of stop where I was and set up the tent. That's what I ended up doing. I pulled the tent out the top of my backpack, found the most level spot I could alongside the trail, and started setting my tent up. And as anyone knows, if you're trying to put a tent up in the cold, when your hands are really, really cold, I was already losing dexterity. Managed to eventually get the tent set up, not in the best spot, but you know, it was up. Got inside the tent and I thought, okay, I'll put some dry clothes on. Didn't really have any dry clothes. I hadn't brought a change of shirt, I hadn't brought a change of underwear. I didn't have a change of shorts, anything like that. The only dry stuff that I had, or semi-dry stuff, was a pair of socks. So I put dry socks on, left my wet underwear on, left the wet shorts on, I think, and then I took my t-shirt off and the rain jacket and put on the sweater, the fleece sweater. So already I don't have like a full, dry, warm layer of gear to put on. So there's the first mistake. So then I think, okay, I rolled out my Thermarest. I just had a foam, a Thermarest ridge rest, the foam pads. Laid that down, sat on that, okay. Still really cold, starting to shiver, starting to like freak out a little bit, starting to panic. So I thought, okay, I'll get in the sleeping bag. You know, once I'm in my sleeping bag, I can get in there and I'll warm up within a few minutes. Pulled the sleeping bag out the bottom of my backpack, and my sleeping bag was wet. It wasn't 100% wet, but like I would say 50% of the filling was wet. And as anyone knows, once you get a sleeping bag wet, it loses almost all of its insulation. So now I'm really starting to freak out. I'm really starting to panic. Like, I know this is all my fault. I hadn't waterproofed my sleeping bag at all. You know, I was a beginner. I didn't really know that I needed to do that, and I certainly didn't expect the weather that we'd had. What had happened is just that constant rain all day had got my backpack wet, and the backpack had become saturated and got the sleeping bag wet. The sleeping bag was at the bottom of the backpack, and obviously throughout the day I'd been taking the backpack off, putting it down on the ground, and it just acted like a sponge and absorbed a lot of water through the bottom. So now I'm really starting to freak out because I'm shivering. I've got no dexterity in my hands. My sleeping bag's wet. I've got no real dry clothes. It's snowing and wind, like the wind is blowing snow underneath the vestibule of my tent. I'm on my own, kind of freaking out. And that, in a way, that fear and that panic actually helped me, because they say, you know, when you freak out and you panic like that, it can go one way or the other. The one way is that you freeze and you give up and you just stop. And I knew that wasn't an option, because if I did that, then I was going to start being in real serious trouble with like hypothermia. So that fear spurred me into action. I started to think about all the different things that I could do to warm up. I wasn't hungry, but I knew I had some extra granola bars. So I like quickly ate a couple of granola bars to try and warm myself up from the inside out. Then I thought, okay, I'll make a hot drink. Pull out my stove, you know, screw it onto the gas canister, pull out a big lighter. Fortunately, the big lighter wasn't wet. I don't know what I'd done, but it wasn't wet. But my fingers were so cold and so numb that I didn't have enough dexterity to depress the big the clicky, like the wheel that sparks the lighter. I physically couldn't get it to spark when my fingers were so numb. Tried it 4 or 5 times and I just couldn't get my stove lit. Eventually, after I think I ended up using 2 hands, I got my little pocket rocket stove going in the vestibule of the tent, started boiling some water. I had a few packets of Crystal Light that I brought with me. I don't really like the stuff, but I don't know, I think I just had it left over from camp. So I made myself a hot Crystal Light, and that really, really helped. I kind of like got the pot, cuddled it up towards myself and warmed my hands, you know, got the dexterity back in my hands a little bit. Having something sugary and warm inside me obviously started to get my body temperature up, and I started to relax a little bit. So now I'm calming down a little bit, thinking, okay, you know, what else can I do? I took my wet shirt and I wrung it out as well as I possibly could into kind of the vestibule of the tent, and I like made a turban out of it, wrapped it around my head and around my neck just to try and conserve a little bit more body heat. And then I started doing push-ups in the tent just to get the blood flowing, get the blood flowing and try and warm up a little bit. I did bring plenty of food with me, so I thought, okay, again, I'm not hungry, but I'm going to put some calories inside myself. I think I cooked a hot meal, maybe like ramen noodles or whatever. And then at that point, then I was able to, you know, relax a little bit. But of course, I was still cold, I was still wet, I was really miserable, I was kind of freaking out. You know, I'm alone in the woods, pretty inexperienced backpacker, and gone through something like this. Eventually I think I must have dozed off to sleep, but then the problem with a wet sleeping bag, I'd kind of like doze off to sleep for 20 minutes and then wake up and I'd be shivering and freezing, so I'd be doing sit-ups inside my sleeping bag, doing push-ups inside my sleeping bag to get the blood flowing again, and then I'd boil more water, drink another like Crystal Light tea, and then maybe doze off again for another 20 minutes, wake up, you know, push-ups, sit-ups like crazy, make more tea. Eventually, obviously, I ran out of the Crystal Light packets. I think I had about 2 or 3 litres of water with me, which was great, because I ended up just drinking boiling water just to keep myself warm. Yeah, so it was a pretty traumatic experience. I guess about maybe 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, the sun sort of started to come up. And you know, I'd barely slept all night, so I was like, right, now I'm just gonna get going. So yeah, I came out of the tent and there was maybe 3 or 4 centimeters of snow on the ground, which wasn't an awful lot, but obviously for September, that was a pretty big deal. I quickly packed up all my tent, just shoved everything down inside my backpack and started heading north again. The plan was to get to the nearest road and hitchhike into town, call my friend and just get out of there. Like I didn't want to be in the woods anymore. I'd kind of like lost confidence. I was freaking out even at that point a little bit. But yeah, so I was heading north, came across a guy walking his dog, and he kind of looked me up and down. He was like, hey, like, everything all right? Like, did you get on in the snow all right last night? And I said, well, no, not really. And kind of explained the situation to him. And he was a really nice guy. He ended up giving me a lift into the nearest town and dropped me off at the diner, saying, you know, there's a payphone in there and you can get a cup of coffee or whatever. I walked into the diner, the payphone wasn't working, but the hostess or whatever, she kind of looked me up and down and she gave me a bit of a funny look. I think she was a bit hesitant to give me a table. She eventually seated me like way in the back of the diner, and all the locals, you know, drinking their morning coffee were like looking me up and down as if to say like, who's this guy? But yeah, after a few minutes, I kind of explained the situation to her, and she was really nice. I think she felt quite sorry for me. She ended up letting me use her cell phone to call my friend to come and pick me up, and yeah, she took pretty good care of me. So yeah, after a big American breakfast and about 6 cups of hot coffee, my friend turned up. He, you know, checked that everything was all right. I said, yeah, I'm cool. Like, I've calmed down a little bit now. Everything's fine. And then yeah, back to the summer camp we went. But for me, yeah, it was a pretty traumatic experience. It just shows that a bad situation can potentially turn really bad really quickly. I think now it's important that I kind of go through some of the things that I actually learnt from that trip. It was quite a few years ago now, but after that trip, I realised, okay, cool, you can't half-ass this stuff. If you're going to do it, you need to take responsibility and do it properly. So let me now talk about some of the things I learned from the trip. So obviously there are an awful lot of mistakes that I made on this trip, and most of them was basically due to a lack of experience. Of course, kind of these freak weather conditions happened, but I think if you go out into the outdoors, you have to be responsible for yourself and be kind of prepared for any situation that arises. So with that being said, I think bringing a warm layer regardless of the weather conditions is essential, because you don't know what's going to happen. Now with synthetic and down technology, there's no excuse not to be carrying a warm puffy layer with you wherever you go. Even in the middle of the summer, you might need it. I would say put your waterproof layer on sooner rather than later. That's a kind of a tricky one because you need to kind of manage your body temperature, but I personally think it's better to be wearing your rain jacket and be sweaty and wet and warm rather than put your rain jacket on too late and then you can't maintain your core temperature. So yeah, put your waterproof layer on sooner rather than later. I learned that things can go from fine to really bad quite quickly. It doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take an extreme change in conditions. 1 or 2 things can lead to some pretty serious situations. The situation I was in could have been a lot worse. And just because you're in a well-used, well-maintained trail, that doesn't mean bad things can't happen. You could be on a trail that sees a lot of action, a lot of people walking their dogs, like the guy that I met. But if that guy wasn't coming along, and if I hadn't have, if the next road was another 5 miles, yeah, I probably would have been okay, but I would have been in a lot worse condition than I ended up being in. So. Just always be prepared for bad stuff happening, because it does. That's life. And then the biggest thing I learned from that trip is to waterproof everything when you go backpacking, especially your sleeping bag, your warm layers, your jackets, all that kind of stuff. Don't leave it to chance. It doesn't cost much money, and it doesn't cost much weight to waterproof your gear. So there's no excuse. Just do it. You won't regret it. I really hope you enjoyed that little story, and I really hope that you learned something as well. Don't make the same mistakes that I did. Thankfully, I've never made any of those mistakes ever again, more or less. I feel like I'm fairly switched on now as a backpacker. But yeah, hopefully you learned something from that. I'm really intrigued to see what the other guys have said as their scariest backpacking moments. I've got a feeling some of them have got a bit more kind of gnarly stories. So yeah, click the description below, check out the description below to see all the other videos. And yeah, thanks for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe. Cheers, bye.